And we continue at 1:06 in the afternoon on the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wings in Culver City.
We want to give a huge thanks to all the callers in Oakland that called us last hour to give us a live and local update on what's really going on in that city.
It's Oakland, man. Hey, it's Oakland, hey.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. I want to revisit a story that we did yesterday that is just infuriating. I know a lot of people avoid the news at times because it makes your blood boil, and this story certainly will. However, it's important that you know about it because you need to know the wrongs and injustices that are allowed to go on around you, because if you don't understand that, there's no way to change it to prevent it from happening in the future. The story I'm referring to is a story that took place in Orange County, California, where the families of the victims in a high-speed car crash were forced to send letters to the state, to Governor Gavin Newsom, to try to keep an illegal alien convicted felon behind bars, as he was expected to be released from prison over 6 years before his 10-year prison sentence ran out. His name is Oscar Eduardo Ortega Anguiano. I may have butchered that. That's the best I can do.
Good enough.
He's a 43-year-old. He was driving drunk, high, and speeding at nearly 100 miles per hour on the 405 freeway in Orange County in November of 2021. That's when he crashed into a car being driven by a young couple, 19-year-old Anya Varfolomeev and Nikolay Osokin, killing them both in about the most horrific way you can imagine, burning alive. In spring of 2022, he was convicted of 2 counts of gross vehicular manslaughter while intoxicated and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, when they found out what was happening, they immediately put out a detainer for his arrest following his likely release by the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. However, California's sanctuary laws led to questions about whether the state would adhere to that detainer, and CDCR does typically cooperate with ICE detainers, but we're not entirely sure what's going to happen here. Before this tragedy, this individual, Ortega, had multiple felonies on his record, as well as several convictions for driving without a license, and of course, he was in the country illegally to begin with. The governor of California is concerned about this story to the extent that he's being blamed. He put out a statement blaming Orange County District Attorney Todd Spitzer and his office and said this was a deal that the DA's office cut with the judge, so don't blame him. However, that's not what happened. This was a deal that was cut between the defense attorney and the judge. The judge, who is now retired, was known for cutting very lenient deals with criminals, which is exactly what happened here. Making it worse, when this guy was sent to prison, he didn't go to a regular prison. He went to a medical facility, which is where he served his time. That's similar to what a nursing home would be like, where you're treated by medical professionals and you're not in a traditional prison setting. So he didn't go to regular prison, and he didn't serve out even half of his sentence, and this is supposed to be justice. Well, the family is outraged, and joining us right now is the father of Anya, Anatoly Varfolomeev. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Hello?
Anatoly?
Speaking.
Hi there. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
I've got to say, before we get into the details of what happened, which is just infuriating, your daughter, looking at the pictures here, and her friend who were involved in this crash, just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful girl, and I am so sorry for your loss.
Thank you. Thank you. They were beautiful. They were.
No question about it. So does it? It must feel like you're just re-victimized over and over and over again. First, getting the knock at the door that no parent ever wants to get, then having to go through a trial, and now having to relitigate what had happened because the system is failing you.
Indeed. So it is 1,259 days, actually, since that tragic date. And yes, it's extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult to control myself. Since after that, I think friends would tell you that I have changed. Sorry.
It's okay.
I became angry, mad every day, and I'm angry at the murderer. As I said, I will never ever forget and forgive him. And I am mad also at the state authorities that allowed this to happen. So Anya was a beautiful, hardworking girl. She spoke freely 3 languages. She was advanced in Spanish as well. On our trip to Mexico, she served us as an interpreter between locals and us, and no questions were asked about her kind of knowledge of Spanish. And also she spoke of French as a native. And she basically, Kolya, in home environment and everywhere, in school, everywhere, they are named Anya and Kolya. It's their not adult names because they were not adult yet. So they knew each other from the age probably 4, and we were friends with their Sorkin family when they lived here in the Bay Area. And then they moved to the Orange County. So, but Anya and Kolya would spend time together with their friends, and basically they grow up friendly. And that summer of 2021, when the whole group of those kids from Scouts came to celebrate her birthday, maybe on that day it clicked between them. So she confessed to her high school friends in August that she now got a boyfriend. She never had a boyfriend, and I don't think that Kolya had a girlfriend before. So they but that was a distant kind of, as I might say, relationship, because he was in Southern California, she was studying here, and mostly they would talk over the phone. They watched movies on their computers and discussing them while watching. And that was how it was before the tragedy. And she went to the Sorkin family in, I think, either in late August or September first time, and that was her second trip. And she was planning to go with them to the country of Georgia, to Tbilisi. It's a beautiful country, and they wanted to see the country. And that was supposed to happen next Thursday after the tragedy. So the tragedy was on November 13 in the evening, late evening. And they were supposed to fly to Georgia on next Thursday. That was to be Thanksgiving. So that didn't materialize, of course. And on that day, it's awful. It's worse than you can see in Hollywood movies when police knocks on your door at 3:30 in the morning, and actually they did it simultaneously, knocking on the door of the Asokin family house and our house, waking us up, and then delivering that awful, awful news. And since after that, our whole lives changed. Of course, we would like to have it back, but this idiotic, unexpected twist with the California justice system ruined any hope for us of maybe one day going back to our lives. So, and you mentioned the governor. So he is complicit, as well as Kamala, as Alejandro Mayorkas, who were running that open border program, and Newsom ran that sanctuary city county program. That's why the criminal was allowed to be in the United States. If it were not for them, our children would be still alive. And I don't understand the policies. I'm not a politician. I am a regular citizen, as others around me, and I cannot comprehend it. I cannot comprehend the legal system. And in calls, when I accidentally found that he's supposed to have a parole date, I don't know what that is, hearing or date of release, and it was on CDCR page, official page, with all general information. July 2025, I started calling them to find out what does it mean. And I hit the Great China Wall, because CDCR was not responsive at all. It's just, I don't know. They didn't respond to the reporter who did that report the other day on Fox News, Bill Melugin. They didn't respond to Shannon Knight, the Orange County DA office victims liaison, when I contacted her. So it took her a week even to get an answer from them. So you can imagine what that is. It's like a Vatican City. It's a city inside the city. But again, it was very difficult to get any sort of information from them. Only one person in CDCR, when I called, dropped the exact date. Others were saying, "Oh, we are so sorry. You're not the only one with those type of questions. We have many victims calling us why they released early and so on and so forth." And the answer that they gave all the time in my calls, this is how the California justice system works. And what sort of a justice system it is? It's system of injustice, as far as I'm concerned. How can, first of all, the judge gave 10 years for the murder of Kolya, it's strike one, then 10 years for Anya, it's kind of number two, but to be served concurrently. How is it possible? And then he sort of bypassed the aggravating charges that were brought, the drugs, the alcohol, the speed. With regards to speed, he said, "I cannot admit what you have submitted to me, 96 miles per hour. That was on the criminal's odometer. He says, we'll put it like 70 miles. He says, acknowledge that the result will be not the same, but that's what he was doing. And that's why, with all that stuff, when everybody blames the system, we have Governor Newsom at the head of the system. He cannot point fingers to Orange County district attorney office. Yes, I'm not exactly happy with how the district attorney's office handled it. There are some blemishes as far as I'm concerned, but at the same time, everything comes from the top. And to me, it's, a saying that even an unloaded gun can shoot once a year. To me, it sounds like Newsom, Kamala, and other White House regime heads, they allowed to have not only a gun on the wall, but in California case, it's several AK-47 on the wall with magazines loaded, and you never know when they start shooting. We know that one shot has been already fired in the case of Anya and Kolya. How many more? It's up to Newsom to say.
Nikolai.
So he's complicit. Kamala is complicit in the death of our children, and I want them to be they are responsible, and I want them to be I want an answer from them. In the court, I don't care. It's like they loaded that gun and allowed this guy to shoot. That's how I consider it.
Well, you are entitled. You are certainly entitled to have justice. You are entitled to hold them accountable for the decisions that led to this tragic evening. Unfortunately, I'm up against a hard break here, and I am so happy that the federal government now is getting involved in this case so that this guy will go to a prison, and he will not be able to get out early. In federal prison, they don't play the same games that they do in California. I am so sorry for your loss. Thank you so much for stopping by, and thank you so much for being vigilant on this to shine a light on it so that your daughter did not die in vain.
Thank you.
Anatoly, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
That last interview we did with the father of the girl who was killed in that horrific automobile accident in Orange County was hard to do, and I'm sure hard to listen to, because you could hear the pain that he is still going through the speakers out of the radio. I can't imagine going through something like that, starting with the knock at the door in the middle of the night, and then have it become a never-ending nightmare where you have to deal with the trauma of losing a child, you have to deal with the trial, and then you have to find out that they're letting him out early and there's nothing you can do about it because the system in this screwed up state is so backwards. Thank God the feds are stepping in, and Bill Asaley, who we had on this program, 2 weeks ago, is saying that he's going to pursue federal charges against this guy to keep him in prison. This guy should never get out of prison ever again. And I know it's difficult for the family to have to stay on top of this, but I'm so glad they did, because it's a public service to the rest of us. Because Newsom and company just flat out deny that things like this happen. They say, nope, doesn't happen in California. That's propaganda. It's not true. The real crime is in red states. Montana is where all the criminals can run loose. And we know it's just not true. It's just like the crime dropping in Oakland. They can say whatever they want. It's just not true. It doesn't correspond with what we see with our own two eyes. And for the family to have the courage to stand up and call them out on this, I think is a wonderful thing, because what the father was saying was the truth and what Newsom is saying is not. And sometimes the truth isn't what gets printed in the paper. But this guy has passion, and this guy is on a mission to make sure that in this particular case, the truth is told. And as a direct result of his advocacy, this guy is going to end up in prison. Now, it's coming from the feds and not the locals, but that's fine. The feds won't let him out of prison early. I'm much happier and much more confident with this guy being in a federal prison than him having anything to do with state prison, where Newsom and Bonta and all of their appointees can screw it up. So thank you to him for having the bravery to come on this show and tell that story. All right, let's move on and get an update on high-speed rail here in California.
High-speed rail is broke, and they need $7 billion just to keep on track for opening Wasco to Merced by 2032 or 2033. ABC 10 in Sacramento recently did a deep dive on the high-speed rail and sat down with one of its biggest boosters in the California State Senate, State Senator Dave Cortese, who still believes this thing is great and we should be supporting it.
Who the hell is a true believer at this point?
Let's find out. Here is ABC 10 in Sacramento.
As we mentioned in our reporting, $7 billion needs to be made available by next summer for this project to continue. I spoke with Democratic Senator Dave Cortese, the Senate Transportation Committee chair, about his next steps.
We have an actual bill, SB 545, which is an economic analysis, but is a very aggressive one, something that's never been done on high-speed rail.
And we didn't do that in the last 20 years?
Maybe that's part of the problem.
I mean, even before the thing was on the ballot in 2008, this has been discussed and talked about. And in fact, the High Speed Rail Authority predates the bill. This has been around for 20, 30 years.
The entire thing is supposed to be done and paid for by now.
And the economic analysis is up and down the entire corridor, really, Los Angeles to San Francisco.
Yeah, but that's never happening.
No. You can still fly Southwest for very little money, but no train.
The first draft of the study to come back a year from now. This isn't a long-term 5-year study. It's something that we need to get.
No, it's just a year. What's a year?
How is that acceptable?
This is how government works. Oh, let's take another year to study how viable this thing is.
Great.
5-year study. It's something that we need to get numbers back on now, and there's reasons for that, because decisions are going to be made as to whether to continue to put cap and trade money into high-speed rail, as to whether.
Oh, there's one of the other biggest scams of this thing. While a lot of the money that went for this came from the bond that was passed in 2008. California puts about $1 billion of the general fund into this train every year, and also 25% of all the money collected through cap and trade, which is one of the reasons gas prices are so high in this state, it goes toward high-speed rail. And remember, the whole idea of cap and trade is polluters would buy these credits, and they would use those credits to then offset their pollution by, I don't know, planting trees in the rainforest. Well, how exactly are we cleaning up the environment by adding construction to a train that will never exist?
No, cap and trade is just a slush fund that politicians in Sacramento can use for whatever pet projects they want to fund. And right now, the project du jour is high-speed rail.
You remember last year, not only was the California Air Resources Board looking to increase cap and trade, and that's why gas prices were set to go up by 40 to 70 cents this year, but they wanted to use cap and trade money to give rebates for people to buy e-bikes.
Such a scam.
Continue to put cap and trade money into high-speed rail, as to whether or not we have a legitimate argument to the federal government that they should keep entering into agreements with us.
Yeah, they're not going to do that.
On what planet is Donald Trump going to give you fools more money?
On high-speed rail.
There was a state assembly transportation.
I think the plan is, let's fund it ourselves for the next 4 years, and then maybe we'll get someone friendly in there, and they'll give us more money.
Yeah, well, guess what? It doesn't matter if it's 2024 or 2028. It's not going to be Kamala.
on high-speed rail.
There was a state assembly transportation hearing. Somebody from the LAO basically said that we need $7 billion by next summer. What's going to happen if we don't get that money?
The High-Speed Rail Authority actually has to make a very specific annual report to my committee. We hope to have that hearing set by May. And
boy, these guys are just on it.
Boy, no one's in a hurry. For a project that was supposed to be done by now, no one seems to be looking at their watch and tapping their foot.
It's such an interesting way to run a government because you have an entire legislature, the Assembly and the State Senate, that writes and passes thousands of bills every single year, but they never seem to spend a whole lot of time seeing how those bills actually work, if they're doing what they're intended, and making sure that things are done properly.
No, but this is also a function of term limits. Nobody in Sacramento thinks in terms of the future. There's no long-term planning going on at all. It's what can I do that'll help me get to my next office?
Well, and to that point, there's nobody in the legislature now who was there in 2008 when this was passed.
And we're going to find out. But it could be that there's delays on that Central Valley piece, until that next $7 billion is secured.
So it won't be done by 2033.
No, and what they're doing is they're holding us up for money.
It would be great if the federal government came through with $4 or $5 billion of that like we were expecting, but if not...
Yeah, that's not happening.
That ship has sailed, or should I say that train has left the station.
That may slow things down. The real tragedy of that now is there's 31 job sites open as we speak.
Here we go. It's all about the jobs. It doesn't matter that this thing doesn't go anywhere. And if you connect the Central Valley to the Central Valley, it doesn't really do anything for the Central Valley, but it's a job creator.
If they actually got that leg up and running, do you think those trains would just run empty all day long?
Who's going from Bakersfield to Merced? And it's not even Bakersfield, it's Wasco. So unless you just got out of prison and you need to go to UC Merced, I don't really see who's using this train.
Well, wait, isn't there a prison in Bakersfield too?
That's the one in Wasco, yeah.
Okay, and then is there a prison in Merced?
Might be one near it.
Okay, maybe if you get transferred from one prison to another, they can put you on the train.
There's
And we have no idea what this is going to cost. Are you going to spend $200 to go from Bakersfield to Fresno for the weekend?
By the way, remember that month-long jury duty trial I sat on?
Oh, yeah.
We sent Grandpa to Wasco.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Didn't make it a year. Already dead.
There's there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 15,000 jobs, as we understand, right now, ongoing. So every time...
That's all this is about. It's a job creator. It doesn't matter that they haven't done anything.
No, and for a state senator who represents an area that's impacted by those jobs, I guess he can just wear it on his sleeve. But why are the rest of us supposed to go along with it?
So every time you have a delay in capital money, in investment money like that, it's usually somebody's paycheck that's going to get hit.
We actually took a trip.
All right, let's go ahead and take a break here. Right now, we're going through all the latest regarding California's high-speed rail.
Let's go back to this interview with State Senator Dave Cortese from ABC 10 in Sacramento.
We actually took a trip to the Hanford Viaduct a couple weeks ago, and high-speed rail officials down there told us their goal is to finish all of that entire corridor by 2026, because eventually they want to use the Hanford Viaduct to be a testing track.
They have to, once they lay the track, they have to test it for 3 years before they can even put somebody on it.
What the hell?
Do you have faith that we're able to meet that timeline?
Based on the current funding sources they have, honestly, I'm not going to find out until we have this next hearing.
Yeah, that's a no.
That's a hell no.
And this is what the authority has done since this thing started. They put a whole bunch of timelines to say, we're not going to meet that, we're not going to meet that.
Did they meet one deadline this entire time?
No.
Who's running this operation? American Airlines?
But it's a great question. It's a question we're going to have to ask. And they're going to need to be very specific with their responses to the public on the promises that we make. And I think that's been a problem politically in California the last few years. People talk about cost of living and all kinds of other issues that are bothering taxpayers and voters in California right now. I think what's really bothering them is they want to make sure they're getting their money's worth. If we're putting money in, we say we're going to open up a year from now, we need to do that. Just like...
Okay, but you're not. And we know you're not going to meet that deadline. And we know there's going to be no train. And this guy seems to be highly tolerant of all of that.
Well, of course.
Major cities that have been built, Los Angeles.
I mean, this is a success. They've spent a bunch of money. A whole lot of unions got to hire a lot of people. And then in turn, they donate to someone like his campaign.
Oh, and I'm sure they took a lot of property through eminent domain, so people got paid off. I'm sure they have a bunch of different consulting firms that are working with them, PR firms and the like. We know that they put a bunch of retired politicians on the High-Speed Rail Authority board, so they're making out okay. From his point of view, it's a smashing success.
San Jose, Silicon Valley, San Diego, there were no magic dollars from the federal government.
Wait, none of the train's going to go to any of those places?
No, it was supposed to be San Francisco to L.A. That's how it was sold to us.
And then eventually Sacramento to San Diego. None of that's happening.
Major cities that have been built, Los Angeles, San Jose, Silicon Valley, San Diego, there were no magic dollars from the federal government. You know, the cities made their deals with developers to create the infrastructure they needed, and some of it took time, but it got done.
What's your last message to the naysayers?
Well, it had to get done because if it didn't get done, no one would move there. No one would open up a business there, and there would be no population for your town. The problem with the high-speed rail is that there's no audience if it ever actually does get built. If it costs more money and takes more time than flying on an airplane, who in the world would do that outside of retirees who have all the time in the world?
Especially people in your district, too, you know, who may feel like, I grew up in your district, right? And since a kid, I've heard about high-speed rail. For people who are just like you were saying, feel like they're not.
This reporter's probably like in her early 30s. She's not kidding when she says since she was a kid.
Yeah. Well, if you're her age, it's true.
Feel like they're not getting their money's worth. Literally cannot physically see how this can happen in their lifetime. What do you have to say for those people?
What I would say to them is stop looking at this project as just a rail project.
Here we go.
It's a jobs project.
This project as just a rail project and start looking at it as the largest economic development project in the history of the state.
That doesn't mean anything.
Okay, think about that for a second. It doesn't matter if the rail actually is laid. It doesn't matter if the trains are actually running. As long as people get paid, who cares?
Let them cook.
That when you start putting high-speed rail through these communities, it spawns major economic development. It doesn't just create construction jobs. It creates commerce. It creates commercial development. It creates shopping centers. It creates office space. It creates housing.
Actually, it doesn't, because the train's not going anywhere.
No, this is all in your head, buddy.
Creates synergy with the institutions of higher education. We've seen that with Stanford, with Cal, with San Jose State, in Silicon Valley. Taxpayers didn't pay for the Highway 101 interchanges entirely themselves that exist in my district. In many cases, those were contributed to by developers who wanted to build more housing, but knew that they had to meet the traffic congestion problems. They had to remedy those. They had to cure those. And
how many cars has high-speed rail taken off the road in the last 20 years?
Zippola.
And that's the dance that has to be done here on high-speed rail. But back to your base question, we've always looked at this as a rail project almost in isolation, as if the Central Valley is always going to look the same as it does now, and there's just going to suddenly be this 220-mile-an-hour train. And I think that's been some of the criticism. Why do you even need a 220-mile-an-hour train, you know, in Merced or in Fresno?
That is a question that's completely legitimate.
And this is, I think, the direction that they're going to go in. Stop looking at it as a rail project and start looking at it as a jobs project. Which is a loser's attitude. Who cares if we actually build what we say we're going to build? That's not what's important.